This is the Working Drummer Podcast. Featuring ground level pros from all styles and regions. Real drummers with real stories about making a living in music.
Hey everyone, welcome to Working Drummer Podcast. I'm Zach Albetta, and it's that time once again to have our yearly chat with our buddy Nick Ruffini of Drummers Resource. We love getting Nick's perspective on what's happening in the drum world, in the podcast world, the media world. He's always got his finger on all those pulses. And in this one, as usual, we get into what each of us are wrestling with or being inspired by behind the drums in our careers and in our lives. This episode is sponsored by Sonatus USA. Get it right at the source is the most common advice we hear about recording drums. Tuning and mic placement are a great place to start, but what shouldn't be overlooked is the space you're playing in. The time and energy it takes to work up and record a great performance shouldn't be wasted in a sonically bad environment. Investing in a proper blend of absorption, diffusion, and bass traps will improve the quality of your recordings just as much as the investments you make in your playing, instruments, and recording equipment. Whether you're tracking, rehearsing, mixing, or just practicing, having a great sounding room is essential. Sonatus USA provides the products and consultation to get your drums sounding the best they can in whatever space you're working with. Check them out at sonatususa.com. That's sonitususa.com. And you can also hear acoustician Anthony Grimani of Sonatus talking with Matthew Krause about all things sound treatment in episodes 306, 308, and 313. We would appreciate your support on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workingdrummer, and a donation in any amount gets you access to exclusive content from our former guests. Think of this as professional development for drummers, all useful and actionable lessons for the working pro. We're populating new content regularly, and as little as $1 a month gets you access to all of it. If Patreon isn't your thing, you can also make a one-time donation through PayPal. There are links for both on our homepage at workingdrummer.net. While you're there, you can learn more about this episode and check out our archive of over 300 episodes. Also, please subscribe to Working Drummer Podcast on your platform of choice. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Lastly, however you listen, please leave us a rating and review. This helps new listeners find us. So the last time we talked with Nick was spring of 2020, just as the pandemic was hitting full swing and everything was starting to shut down. So it was good to have this chat with him as things are opening back up and we all have different perspectives on how we want to move forward, as I'm sure is the case for most of you. So here we go. Hope you dig Nick Ruffini.
Hey, I have this mug. It says Wicked Pissa on it. What does that mean?
You don't know what that means?
I like it.
You know what? I honestly don't. It was a gift from a friend of mine, a friend of Liz's that lives in Boston.
Doesn't that means it's like a really good? Go ahead, Zach.
I thought it was a bummer. I thought a pisser was a bummer, and wicked means like a huge bummer.
I thought if you go out and get pissed, then you go out and get drunk. So I thought wicked pisser was maybe like a bender kind of thing, maybe.
Wicked Pissa would be like a really bad.
Or is a Wicked Pissa this is probably going to get us into trouble, by the way.
I don't think any of this is right.
All right, let me make sure it's recording. Hang on.
It's outstanding or awesome.
Okay.
Is what it means.
Oh my God. That took the steam right out of it. Yeah. It means outstanding or awesome.
Looked it up.
Yeah, you might as well have been Alexa right then.
As my sister calls it, the Wonder Killer. She's like, "Oh, you're going on Google, the Wonder Killer?"
The Wonder Killer. That's great,
dude. That's going to be a new platform right there.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm stealing that from your sister. That's great.
Well, before we kind of got the recording together, that was kind of a natural segue because, Nick, it would be cool to kind of talk about what it is you're doing and like how you've expanded things in your world, because we were talking about just the world of podcasting, how it's grown so much since we've started. Mm-hmm. And now we're getting people that are friends and, people we work with and saying, hey, I want to start a podcast. Can we meet for coffee and talk? And I want to pick your brain about what you're doing, how you've done it, and how much it's changed. there's some platforms out there where all you need is just an idea and you get on there and they do everything for you. And I've got a couple friends that have done that. I'm not super thrilled about that. That seems like the garage band of podcasting. It doesn't give you a lot of freedom to be creative, but it gives a platform for people that aren't super serious about it, which is great. But it's really cool. So like in the music community and the drum community, there's been a lot of different types of podcasts that have come out. And I think it's really fun because I feel like it's elevated with the community has grown.
Yeah.
It's getting more eyes and ears on our podcasts because people are like, oh, well, I didn't even know what this was, and I can listen to it on my phone. You know, people are still discovering it, but it's not a foreign term anymore. You know, you don't have people saying, what's a podcast? So that's less and less of an issue, which benefits all of us. So how has that changed for you, and how have you reacted to that?
Yeah, well, to your point, what you said earlier about how now when I started Drummers Resource, I don't know if there was another drumming podcast out there. There may have been one. And now, you know, like we were producing podcasts for other people. We were producing LP's podcast. They're on hiatus right now, but we were producing LP's podcast, and people were like, doesn't that serve as like competition for Drummers Resource? And the way that I look at it, I say, no, the more podcasts that are out there about drumming or music or anything, the better. Like you had just said, sort of, you know, the tide rises all boats. So, but how it's changed over the years. When I first started, I mean, I made my first podcast in 2007. Wow. And we were on tour, and our manager was like, you should do this thing called a podcast. I knew nothing about it. I was like, I don't know where it goes, how to record it, how people get it. None of that. But then even when I started Drummers Resource in 2013, I would talk to people, you know, you're at a wedding or you're at a party or something, and it's like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I run this podcast. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, so you're broke and you live in your, you know, in your parents' basement kind of thing.
And you're like, shut up.
Yeah, exactly.
I live above my parents' restaurant, okay?
Yeah, no, I don't. But
that hurts.
So how it's changed now, and not that it's not necessarily about public perception, but it's just interesting how the public perception has changed about them. So now when you go somewhere and it's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I own a podcast production company. People are like, oh, yeah, that's really cool. So, and so on one side, it's becoming more and more of an accepted medium. And I would say it's arrived. The advertising dollars haven't gotten there yet, but it's arrived in terms of like major companies, you know, all of the movie studios and all that, they're all making podcasts now, celebrities, athletes, all of that kind of stuff, which is great. But I also think that podcasting did the same thing that the internet did, or I should say what YouTube did for aspiring TV writers or directors and things like that too, is it leveled the playing field and you could just put your stuff out there. So sure, Warner Brothers can put out a new podcast tomorrow with Justin Timberlake or someone, I don't know, I'm just naming names here, but I can start one tomorrow as well and be on the same platform as them. And realistically can compete with them on the same platform. So before, you know, if you wanted to start a television show, you had to get it approved by ABC or whoever, and the gatekeepers had to let you in, and then you get put on ABC. Now you can just put a television show on YouTube, and if it's good, it'll rise to the top. So I think that's what's really changed is the public perception of it, the dollars that are going into it, and the understanding that this is a medium that people want. And I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot more money getting thrown at it, which is always good. Like it doesn't always come down to the money, but like at some point you have to think about the economics of something that you're building. So, I mean, that's how I've seen it change over the years. Now everyone is talking about podcasting, and 10 years ago, it was sort of like, I don't know, it was a niche crowd that listened to, NPR or instead of reading a lot of books, they were listening to a lot of podcasts. So
I want to get Nick's take on this. I want to push back a little bit on the idea that if it's good, it will rise to the top, like on YouTube or in a podcast or whatever. because in a sense it is democratized and the playing field is leveled, but I feel like there's a different gatekeeper now, and the gatekeeper is algorithms, basically. Like before, you had to get the blessings of some suits, but now you either have to catch lightning in a bottle algorithm wise, or like really know how to work the algorithms on whatever platform you're on.
I disagree with that. So my take is that I don't think that anyone should be trying to game the algorithm at all. You're on a platform that was free for a long time and has reduced, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, it doesn't matter, which has reduced how much organic traffic you get or how many people see your posts organically. And then you have to pay for it. You have to pay for advertising, but it's no different than if you opened up a brick and mortar store. You have to have marketing, you have to have advertising. So you can't like trying to game the algorithm. What happens is you're going to start creating content that doesn't serve your audience well. All it does is game the algorithm, and it's great for the algorithm, horrible for your audience.
Right.
So, it kind of makes me think about for an example, years ago when we were thinking, how do we get more followers on Facebook? This is probably 5 years ago. I'm like, hey, maybe we could buy some sort of boost in followers, and it just kind of didn't work. Like we grew, I don't know how many thousands of followers, but it was all these really weird.
It's all bots. People.
It was, and I'm like, that was, I don't know, that wasn't good at all. That was, all these people that were obviously not real Facebook people, and certainly not people interested in what we were doing. And so that, again, that maybe is what you're talking about, like that we're trying to use the algorithms to grow our followers as opposed to just the content.
Yeah, I mean,
itself.
there's a lot of people who are like, they have groups where anytime they have 50 people that are in a group. So anytime you post something on Instagram, those 50 people in the group go and like your post and comment on it. That open. So the how the algorithm works, and I'm sure that you guys have done some research on this a little bit, but
oh yeah, we're all over it, man.
Yeah. Just in general, so like the way that the algorithm works, this is a very, very simplified version of it, but you post something and Facebook, or let's say Instagram, because Instagram is sort of the platform now. Instagram says, okay, we're going to let 3% of your audience see this. And if those 3% who see it comment on it, like it, then Instagram says, oh, this is a post that seems to be a good post. So it opens up that fire hose a little bit more, and it says, we'll serve it to 8% of your people. And then if more people are, and then once it opens up, if more people are liking it and more people are commenting, Instagram says, oh, this post must be a really good post. So they open up it a little bit more, and you open up a little bit more. That's why once in a while you'll put a post up and it gets, it gets 950 comments or whatever, and all these likes and all that. It's a gradual sort of step up process. And what everyone tries to do is they try to game the system to get more people to like. That's why you always see like people say comment below if, let us know what you're thinking about this, or tag someone who would like to see this post or whatever. That's so that more people are interacting with that specific post, so that Instagram thinks that it's good content and then opens up the fire hose a little bit more for more people to see. The problem with that approach, if it's really good content and it's really resonating with your audience and people are commenting on it and liking it and sharing it, that's great. Then you're doing your job. You're putting out good content. But if you're putting out content, like a lot of people will put out a post and purposely misspell a word in the post so that everyone comments in the comment section and says, like, this is how you spell the word, or they'll make a mistake in the post. And that's to game the algorithm so that more people will comment on it. It'll open up the fire hose a little bit more. But at the end of the day, is that good content for your audience? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
So it turns in, it's just a vanity metric of, and it people are doing it for the likes and the comments to make themselves feel better, but it's not really driving. It's not in driving engagement, and you're not. And if you're a business, like even like Zach and I were talking about this the other day on Instagram, where I was saying that like if you own a business, your job is to make your employees happy, not your customers, because happy employees make happy customers. And so we started talking about band leaders and things like that. So like, I think that you're a business owner, whether you're a solo artist or you're this or you're that. So at the end of the day, like your Instagram or your Facebook or whatever you're putting out there, your main goal should be to drive your business outcomes, whatever those are, whether it be getting more gigs, getting a record deal, selling a record, getting more people to listen to your podcast. Like those are your business outcomes. That's what I think that your social media profile should be doing while creating awesome content for your followers.
And as far as like algorithms, there are like subtle things, little tweaks that you can make that will get more people to interact. Like, for example,
right.
I stumbled across, how many people reacted to some Instagram posts that I have personally put on my own profile. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I started to kind of see of the posts that got the most interaction and most watches, what was the common thread between them all? And it might have been, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was maybe the camera angle was the same. There was some lighting, there was some certain things about it, and then there was a couple posts that I did that didn't get a lot of likes or didn't get a lot of interaction with, and I'm like, well, what's the common thread there? And then trying to like, okay, this works, that, because I don't post a lot personally. And, it's funny because we all have guests that either are like way on top of it, and they do really great content, and some people that are great musicians and have a lot of information to contribute to our podcasts, but they don't post a lot. And they're always like, I need to do more. And right. Sometimes you're like, no, you don't. Or maybe you do, or we want to see it, So I don't. My point is, if I'm going to finally get around to post some shit, personally, I want people to see it. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want it to be worth my time, I guess is what I'm saying, for somebody that doesn't post a lot. If that's your personality.
I think if you want people to see it and you don't post a lot and it's really not something that you're really dedicated to doing, then you should put money behind it.
What do you mean?
You should boost your post or you should be running ad campaigns. And no one wants to hear that because they're like, oh, this should be free. But it's like, they're a business, and we're sort of like, hey, we should be able to use this product for free. But like, I say, and it's been said numerous times before, that like, if you're using a service that's free, you're not the customer, you're the product.
Yeah.
So, but so their job is not to make it free for everyone. Their job is to generate revenue. And if you want more people, this is how they work. They start these platforms. They have the engagement levels are really, really high, and it's sort of like wide open, and everyone sees your stuff. They get everyone addicted to the platform, and then they pull back the organic reach. So now they're like, oh, you want people to see, like I have 30,000 followers on Facebook, and if I post something on Facebook, literally the other day I posted something and 19 people saw it. So
that's weird.
Oh my God.
But if you pay for it, then it works. And I think like not to bogart this conversation, but I think that one thing about how to determine what you're putting money behind and stuff like that, put your stuff out there, whatever is resonating, which means whichever is getting more likes, more comments, stuff like that, then put dollars behind that stuff. So put it out there organically, see what happens, then put some dollars behind it. And if it does well, put a little bit more money behind it. And I'm not saying a lot of money. I'm saying, $10 or something just to boost it.
For sure.
See if it resonates a little bit more. If it does, okay, put a little bit more money behind it. And then look at that post and say, okay, what was it about that post that did really well? Let me try to duplicate that.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, and it's just kind of like, well, how much do I want to invest in this? What kind of work am I trying to, where am I trying to expand my workload in my playing?
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, you got to kind of triangulate, the algorithms, the advertising, what you're spending money on, blah, blah, blah. But then you got to think about like who, I want as many people as possible to see this, but ultimately, what kind of people do I want to see this?
Yes.
Like, is it fellow drummers? Is it producers? Is it band leaders? Or is it random normies who might want to take drum lessons? Like, it's hard to know how to. Well, I mean, it's not hard to know what you want to target. I guess it's hard to know how to do that.
Well, that's the difference between
too wide a net.
That's the difference between boosting a post and running an ad campaign, though. And we don't have to get into the weeds about this, but if you boost a post, you're just boosting it to the people who already follow your page.
Right.
If you're running an ad campaign, then you can specify exactly who you want to see it, where, like what interests they have, where they live, all that kind of stuff.
No, that's great. That's great because I don't necessarily am trying to like reach drummers. I'm trying to reach songwriters. So if a specific thing for me, as an example, is like I would like to do more recording for singer-songwriters for my home studio. I don't need to send stuff to band leaders. I've been very fortunate that this year is starting to grow into enough live work for me. I feel extremely blessed. But again, people are trying to make up from last year, and I'm just the benefactor of it. But what I would like to do over time is shift from live to being here. Now, so that's what that,
When you're saying live, are you back on the road or are you staying local? Yeah,
both.
Yeah,
both. I mean, it's
because I know for a while you were like, I want to get off the road.
Well, because the what was keeping me busy full time was a band that was gone 300 days a week, 300 days a year. So I'm off the road, that type of thing. But like this week, I'm in Kentucky playing Friday. I'm in Nashville Sunday. Next week, I'm in Asheville. And then I'm back, and then so it's a combination of things. So I am back out on the road, quote unquote, but
got you.
We're talking like 2-3 days at a time, and then out to, I'm flying to San Diego next month. But those are rare. And there was somebody offered me another San Diego thing, and I was like, no, that's it. I don't want to. I have the choices. So, but that's, that's a different thing. Nashville has handled the pandemic a lot differently than LA, for example, has.
Right. Yeah. And like before we dive into the whole pandemic thing, what you were talking about wanting to sort of transition from really heavy live to spending more time at home doing stuff in the studio, I have the same goal. And what I'm realizing is we just had this conversation about how to maximize your reach on Instagram or whatever, and how that can garner some work. But what I'm realizing is that I think the work that I'm really going to care about and that's going to be sustainable is going to come from the in-person relationships that I already have and the ones that I cultivate. We did this whole series of episodes and little talks with Air Gigs with David Blacker from Air Gigs. And I've done a bunch of Air Gigs jobs. Matt has done a bunch of Air Gigs jobs, and it's a great platform to just record at home and make some money. But what I'm realizing about it is that it's that, I think, for me at least, is still going to be ancillary. Like the Air Gigs hustle is still going to be secondary to who do I want to invest in terms of like creating a relationship with them and working with them a lot. And I've been in that mindset, for live playing for my whole career. Yeah. But now I'm starting to think about that, like how can I translate that strategy into the studio? And Air Gigs will always be there. I'll get offers and people hit me up that I've never met. But I think I still want to prioritize like the actual in-person humans in my life that I want to make music with.
Mm-hmm.
So to add to that, Zach, I mean, it's the same for me. Air Gigs, and I want to invest more into that. But the work that I've gotten most of consistently has been through personal relationships that have come from the live work that I've done. And then somebody's like, hey man, I run a studio, what are you doing? And then, hey, I know a producer that's working out of his home. And then that has turned into some other things. So that for sure has created more long-term things. But just to interject alongside this, Nick, I know you interviewed Mark Stepro a couple years ago, and I had him on last week, and he was amazing, man.
He's great.
Like, the episode
awesome.
turned out like 2 hours long, and there was so much, like, I can quote so many things from him. He was amazing. But he mentioned, he goes, yeah, the whole home recording thing is really cool, but when I was like 14 years old, I didn't say to myself, man, when I grow up, I want to send WAV files over. I want to record and send WAV files. I mean, I'm butchering the quote, but I was like, oh my God, yes, that's amazing. Now, I do like to record from home. I do like the comfort of being here and whatever, but yeah, we did not get into music just to box ourselves in. I mean, it is about social interaction and creativity. There's pros and cons. Just to tie this idea up, talking with my friend Mike Jackson, who's helped me get my home studio up, and I said, it's so funny because we've dreamed about this since we were kids, and now I finally got more gear than I could have ever imagined when I was 15, 16 years old. And I'm like, okay, now what? It's really cool, and it's nice to work this way. But it's not as exciting as I thought it would be, which is cool, which is fine, because that's not what music is.
Well, I find it,
in my opinion,
I find it more exciting. I mean, definitely, like what Mark Stepro said cracked me up and resonated with me too. But it also made me realize that, like, even if I'm home alone, if I'm isolated here, making drum tracks and sending them off, that process is more enjoyable if I'm sending it to someone that I have a relationship with, who is a friend of mine, who I've played with live, who I love and want to play with for the rest of my life, Like,
I agree.
Sending it off to a stranger whose song may or may not be dog shit, that's a paycheck. It's just kind of a transaction, and that's fine. And, obviously being in the room with the people you love, whether it's recording or playing live, like, that's plan A. That's why we all do this. But, translating those relationships that you already have, if I'm home here and I've got the sound of someone that I fucking love in my ears, that's not bad.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
It's interesting to me that, and we've talked about this before, about having control over your career, or at least having being able to make decisions and saying, okay, I don't want to do this gig, or I don't want to do this thing, or I do want to do this thing. And I think there's a couple different people. There's the people that are like, it doesn't matter to me, I'll play any gig, anywhere, anytime, I don't care who it's with, it doesn't matter, as long as I'm playing drums, I'm happy. And then the other side is, I just want to play with people that I like, and and I don't need to take every gig. And then there's
music that I like.
And music that I like. And then there's sort of people in the middle who are like, I don't really want to play these gigs, but I have to because I need the money, and that's just my livelihood. And I wonder where most people are falling with home studios and stuff like that. Like, for me, I have zero desire to have a drum room and record tracks for people. The flip side of that is, I absolutely love being in the studio, and I'm a studio rat. I could live in the studio, but I want to be in there with other people.
Right. Right.
And like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying it because I don't have a drum room and no one's calling me and asking me to play on tracks. Right. But it's never even like, what's that?
I didn't want to anyway.
Yeah. But I've never even thought, like, I want a drum room that I can record drums in for myself, or, just have like a place that I can set up my podcast studio and all that. But like, I've never thought, and then I can go out and do drum tracks and everything. But the beauty of it is that's my prerogative. But how many people do you think are out there that are setting up drum rooms that are like, well, I don't really know what else to do, so I guess I'm going to set up my drum room and try to do drum tracks, even though I don't really want to, because that's all I know.
I think it's a lot after 2020 because you saw a lot of people scramble and like everybody's talking about, I'm building my home studio, I'm getting some new gear, I'm updating things, or I'm starting from scratch. And what happens is because everyone knows what everyone is doing because of social media and everything like that, there's this pressure, maybe subconsciously, that, oh, this is what you do now. Right. And so I think a lot of people forget to ask themselves what it is, what do you want? What is what it is? And so, and I've been guilty of that for sure. And I think what I'm finding is I really do enjoy this process and I want this to be a part of what I do. Mm-hmm. But again, like I mentioned to Mike, it's like when we were kids, the idea of having all this recording gear and being able to do it from home seemed like a dream, like the ultimate dream. Yeah. And now you're doing it and you're like, huh, I guess it's okay. It's pretty cool. But so yeah, to your point, I think 2020 has created an environment where people have had to ask themselves some tough questions about what they're doing, and to your point, a lot of people and I fall into this category where I was like, I don't care what I do as long as I'm playing drums, I'm happy. Well, 2020 made me think, okay, no, seriously, what do you want to do? Because you never know, the rug could be pulled out from under you, and how are you spending your career and your time and your energy?
I'll ask both of you guys this. How do you feel like you perform in the studio by yourself versus live or with other people in the studio?
Zach, you want to answer this?
Yeah, like it's been educational for me because, basically the last year plus has been my time to get this home tracking thing going. And in addition to the tech learning curve, I really found out some things about my own playing that were, really not working in this room. Like if I was in Capital,
I didn't want to say anything, but now that you brought it up,
Nick's like scrolling my Instagram, like missed the mark on that one. No, like just in terms of. It's been weird because like the first part of my career was just all jazz, right? It was all like touch and playing quiet and all this. And then when I moved to Atlanta, especially, I had to muscle up and play in funk bands and blues bands and top 40 and all that. And then COVID hit and I brought my, newly found muscles into my little tiny room here. And it was like, holy shit, I'm just blowing the roof off this place.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So I've had to like regress, back to the lighter player that I used to be, at least as far as this room is concerned.
Did it almost like you felt like you were recording like you were playing live, but you're not really playing live?
If I was in Capitol Room B, it would have sounded great, but in this bedroom here, it's too much. And we talked with a lot of guys over the last year. Like Jordan Rose and Matt, who was the guy you interviewed that has the studio in Nashville, who talked about, it's like setting up a 57 as a room mic.
Oh, yeah.
Grady Saxman.
Grady Saxman.
So, yeah, like talking to all these guys, they were like, if you're in a small room, like if you play loud, it's going to cause phase issues. Your drums are going to sound tiny and thin instead of huge and fat. So it's been this process for me of like finding that lighter touch again, but also cleaning up my ideas. Because in live playing, it's in the moment and you can, we've all done it where we've just sort of like plowed through some kind of mindless fill that didn't really need to be there, or played ghost notes on the snare that didn't really need to be there. So like I've been listening back to my playing, just realizing how much of it is not always necessary, and in fact working against the clarity of the song and telling the story of the music. And so yeah, it's just kind of like my playing in this room has gotten smaller, like simpler ideas, lighter touch, just more clarity all around. And now that things are opening back up, I'm going back out, and it's like, okay, time to play big and stupid again. Right. So yeah, that's what the recording. That's what learning about recording has sort of done and is still doing to my playing.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, and I haven't done this, but I know that, going in to record a record or something, you're playing under a microscope for whatever, a week or 2 weeks or however long you're in the studio. But to be doing it every day, you're putting your playing under a microscope every single day. And you're like, oh, I never realized I do this, or I never realized, I like feather the bass drum when I don't even mean to.
Right.
It's just and the mics are picking that stuff up.
Yeah.
And Jesus, talk about tuning. Like this past year has upped my tuning game so much, and it still has a long way to go. But like, it's made me realize, like, I didn't know jack shit about tuning before. I was just trying to make my drums like sound big and project as much as possible for most live situations. And I got in here, and like what sounds good to my ears and feels good under my hands, the mics are like, nope.
Yep. Yeah.
So
I'm horrible to. That's like, I'm so bad at it.
Yeah.
We talk to people, or we know people, so Near Z is an example, somebody that's in the studio all the time and knows what he's playing and how the microphone is picking it up. We now have the opportunity to try and simulate that experience by having the recording technology. Now, here's the thing. We've had it for many years now, but a lot of us haven't put it to practice. So one thing that I had a chance to record 8 songs in a studio with other musicians maybe a month ago for the first time in over a year, while I was at home recording a lot and learning a lot, just the way the same that Zach has. So I felt like I was able to go in with a little bit more understanding of what I was going to be, how the microphones were going to be translating. Now, that being said, it was a great studio, professional engineer. The drums sounded amazing. I almost could do no wrong, but at the same time, here's the big difference. At home, I could do 9 takes and pick the best of what I want and take my time, and there's no really time limit. Here, everyone's waiting on me to get it right, and we're doing 8 songs in one day, and it was like, you get maybe 2 takes. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that, as much as I have been recording from home, that's not you don't put the pressure. I didn't have that pressure on myself at home. And so that's the biggest challenge for me, is how much I'm charging to record from home is, so far, the time that it takes me to record, make sure I've got the right track, maybe do an edit here or there, and mix it down and send it for review, takes a lot fucking longer than when you're in a studio with a bunch of people and all you have to do is perform, and they're like, yeah, that's it, moving on, and you get paid. So that's the biggest challenge, is like, okay, what's my time cost situation, and making sure that I'm being aware of that.
I talked to Victor and Drizzo about this, and I don't know why it never hit me before, but I said to him, well, not only do you have to play well in your own studio, but you also need to now be an engineer, and you have to learn how to be an engineer. That's a whole other skill set. Not only do you have to learn how to be an engineer now, and you have to learn all of the technology behind it. And like Zach was saying, like, you have to understand microphones and phasing and all of this stuff, where we never had to know any of that stuff before. We walked into the studio and just did it. And even if you're a guitar player or bass player or something like that, sure, you have to learn the equipment, but I think drums are significantly harder to get dialed in on your own.
Oh, for sure.
And if you think about it, like you're like, imagine yourself going into the studio and being like, okay, Zach's your engineer for the day, right? And you're like, Zach's been an engineer for 9 months,
right?
You know,
right?
And like I'd be like, I don't want him. Yeah, I'd be like, I don't want him to be my engineer, but now you have to be your own engineer and figure this stuff out very quickly.
That can be like intimidating and daunting, but something that kind of reassured me was I interviewed Dan Bailey about 6 months ago, and he said I don't get work because I'm a great engineer. I get work because I am great at engineering my own playing in my room.
That makes sense.
So it's easy to go down rabbit holes on YouTube or Reddit or whatever, just like trying to learn all the hypothetical things that might get thrown at you or that you might be able to do. But I've tried to stay focused on like, okay, I am working with these mics in this room with my playing with these drums. Just like stay focused on that, between that and like another piece of this whole thing that I don't think people talk enough about is mic placement. So much can be achieved through mic placement, before the sound even hits the DAW. There's
sometimes you take the microphone out of the hole and put it randomly on the front of the bass drum, like you did.
You've been following my Instagram. I couldn't believe it, man. Jesus Christ! But that's a perfect.
The best
example.
part of that is like you're like, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Like just experimenting. I fortunately have had the time to just experiment with different mic placements, even if it's like moving the snare mic a half inch this way or that. But like so much, you can do so much EQing just with mic placement. And I would so much rather screw around with mics and drums before I track than screw around with EQ inside the box after I track, chasing overtones and shit. So yeah, like that, the tuning game combined with the placement game, like I said, with my mics, with my drums in my room is what I'm trying to stay focused on, and not get caught up in too much else.
Here's what I'm running into. Like I want to play, I want to perform, I want it to be good. I don't want to mess with a lot of shit on my laptop. But if I know I've got something I can work with, sometimes I'm thinking, okay, good, I'm done. I'm going to go sit on my back porch, light up a cigar, and just sit there and work on music. That's a problem.
When you figure that out, you let me know.
Okay.
Man.
Let me know.
Well, Nick, I remember last time we talked, it was it was like right at the beginning of COVID. But it was kind of a goal of yours at that time to play more. And obviously COVID robbed us all of any opportunities.
That got in the way of that.
Right. But like, were you able to, get a practice room going or some kind of studio, or did your goal for more playing? What happened there?
So I got, so the place that we record our podcast is a studio in North Hollywood. So the woman who owns it is a friend of mine now, and we were at dinner one night, and I was like, something about my drums or something. She was like, you should just set your drums up here and then just come practice here whenever you want. And I was like, are you serious? And we had been drinking wine and stuff. So I like texted her the next morning. I was like, were you serious about that? And she's like, yeah. I was like, done. I'll be there in an hour. So now I have a studio there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can go in. So it's a really cool studio. It's a little room. It's more of a vocal studio, and they do some hip hop stuff there, but there's plenty of room for a drum set. So whenever it's not being used, I can just go in and practice. So I've been practicing. I was practicing a lot there. I was just back east for 2 months, visiting family and stuff, but so I hadn't been in there. But before that, I was in there a lot. And so like two of the things, so yes, to answer your question, been playing
That's
more,
awesome,
obviously not gigging more. But the two things that I've really been working on and really trying to focus on lately is like, one, I want to get my hands in better shape. And two, just overall sonic choices. So I had the kit that I have, like I think I'm gonna sell that and change the dimensions of the kit. And I just switched I'm playing different cymbals now. So I was playing Bosphorus, now I'm playing Zildjians. Just kind of like digging deeper into vintage, not necessarily vintage drums, but vintage sounds. Like all the stuff that I listen to is all old funk and soul stuff. And I'm like, I love my kit, but I'm like, I'm playing on a brand new DW kit. And I'm like, it's just not giving me the sonic characteristics of like a 1964 Sam Cooke song, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So like trying to get sonic stuff. And that's the main point of like trying to get my hands in better shape, because like you were talking about before, like Big and Stupid is like, that's how I play. So I'm trying, you know, I want to have more finesse. I want to really explore like playing different sonic, like understanding better sonic choices and be able to execute those things around the kit. Because that's how I felt like those guys played years ago. They weren't like, I mean, I'm not a chops guy, I never have been, but like they were making very musical choices. And I think that without some level of like proficiency with your hands, I can't get there anyway. Like I feel like those guys just did it naturally. Yeah. For me, I need to like think about it a little bit more.
And when you say like get your hands in shape, I mean you're not talking about being able to play faster, more choppy, badass. You're talking about kind of the opposite, like more nuance. Yeah. How are you going to go about that?
Man, you know what? While we were having this conversation, I was like, maybe I'll ask you guys, and I was going to call Daniel Glass and talk to him about it.
He'd be good.
Really, what I've been doing is like I've been playing singles, doubles, paradiddles, all that stuff at like 35 beats a minute on a pad.
Ooh,
and just and it's fucking hard, man. It's really hard to get it. Yeah. I mean, playing it in time isn't that hard, but like getting everything to sound uniform and to really, and the way that I set the metronome up, I set it on 16th notes. So I'm really hearing where those subdivisions are. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I'm all over the place with landing on those subdivisions. And then, so I'll take it, I'll go 16th notes, and then I'll go quarter notes, then I'll go half notes, then I'll go whole notes, and then I'll go back the other way. And it's hard, man.
Yeah, dude. So there's a warm up I've been doing for years. It's basically, you know, start at 60 BPM, quarters, quarters, triplets, eighths, 16th notes, you know, on up, and then back down, move up the BPM by 10 clicks, all the way up to 100. So if I start at 62, I'm going to end up at 102, whatever. And but here's an interesting thing is that, you know, we all have like different practice pads that we use, and be able to play on different surfaces. I find I become like a really good practice pad player.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But to be able to play on the kit those same ideas is the difference between being chopsy and being finesse.
Yeah.
Because not only being able to play like different types of rolls and different things like that on a floor tom compared to a snare drum. And what is the snare drum? Is it tuned fat and flat? Is it, tuned up high? So different surfaces. And then you've got volume, you have reaction. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways, and Nick, this is amazing. So you have this space, and you could probably sit there and do these super annoying things that only a drummer would benefit from by playing just 16th notes at 120 on a real snare drum. That's sometimes hard for me to do in my own house with my family upstairs. Right. But it's something that I need to do on a real drum. And that's the struggle I'm having. So one way to combat that is I have like two different types of practice pads, and I'll just go between the two while I'm warming up so that my hands are getting used to different surfaces. But really, the idea of finesse, I believe, comes from doing a lot of those warm-up exercises and those practice exercises on a real drum.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes hard to do when you have limited time to make a lot of noise, if that makes sense.
The other, I agree with that. The other thing that I do too, which is like, it's probably the hardest thing for me, is I'll go in and again I'll set the metronome at like 40 or 50 beats a minute and groove. And really try to play a groove and do it for like a half hour. And it's hard, man. And I'm like, because even if you're playing a slow groove, you want to be like then come back to it or something. And I try to just stay there and just groove and like, okay, where is everything sitting? Where, like, how am I hitting the cymbals? How am I hitting the toms? Like, am I playing ghost notes? How are my subdivisions? Like, because I just want it to feel better. And I look at guys like, I'll look at like Carter or like Aaron Sterling or somebody like that, and I'm like, fuck. Or go back and listen to like James Gadsden and all these guys. And I'm like, why does this feel so good? Why does it feel good? And it's like analyzing that kind of stuff and then trying to get that into my playing. And I think it's like, most of it is just sonic choices.
Well, so it is, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Just real quick, look at those guys. Carter and I'm sorry, who's the other?
Aaron Sterling.
Aaron Sterling.
Yeah.
Look at those guys. Look at their face. Look at their posture, and just like how their attitude. Carter's just so relaxed. Carter McLean, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Is who you're talking. Yeah.
Not Carter Beauford.
But well, gosh, Carter Beauford too. I mean, like just this whole personality, and just like, because what we're talking about playing slow, and we're talking about, it's very much a mental game and staying focused for a long period of time with other things going on. And those guys, man, they, not only do they exude a certain amount of confidence, but they exude a certain amount of playfulness, and just like, I'm having fun. And especially Aaron, man, he's just like, I'm hitting record, I'm gonna fucking walk around to this kit and we're just gonna go.
Right.
He's not like thinking about it, he just goes, and you're just like, oh, I've been there a couple times. I know what he's doing.
Yeah.
You're totally, So I don't know, man. So that's fun to watch.
The question I have for Nick is like, when you ask yourself, like, why does this feel so good? What answers do you come up with?
Well, let me rewind a little bit first. So what I kind of had this sort of like moment in the mirror where I was like, all right, here's who I listen to, right? I listened to Steve Bowman, who played on the original Counting Crows record. I loved his playing. But then I listened to James Gadsden. I listened to Steve Jordan. I listened to Steve Gadd. I listened to Steve Ferrone. There's a lot of Steves in there.
The Council of Steves.
The Council of Steves. And so, like, I listened to Jeff Porcaro, and I kind of remove. People are going to kill me for this, but I move Jeff out of that. And the reason I move him out of that, because I think that he was a different player than the rest of those.
Yeah, I agree.
Jeff's one of my favorite drummers of all time too. So like, I'm not putting him down lower. I've kind of put him in a different area. But I was like, if I listen to all of these guys and I admire what they do, why don't I play like them? And then I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, my drums maybe not tuned the way they are. I was like, I'm overplaying. And then I was like, okay, what kind of cymbals are they using? What kind of grooves are they playing? What kind of sticks are they using? How, like, what kind of fills are they doing? Not like I'm trying to cop their style. I'm just thinking like musically, like how are they interacting with the singer? How are they interacting with the bass player? What are they doing inside of their groove that's making it feel so good? And what I started to realize is touch, feel, dynamics, all of that stuff is like, it sounds stupid, but like because it's like, yeah, of course that's what it is. But like really digging into that, because I think a lot of us are like, oh man, it sounds so good. They do all this stuff. And then we get behind the kit and we're like, oh, I want to play my stuff and play all my, like Zach said, like my big dumb stuff.
Right. So what you're talking about, I've started to think of all of that under the big umbrella of movement, of motion, and I've become a little bit obsessed lately with the idea of like how a given drummer sounds, like when you say, God, it feels so good, it sounds so good, like it sounds that way because of how that drummer moves. Yes, it's about choices about the particular groove or the particular instruments they're playing, but like a drummer's sound, I think, is just inextricably linked with their movement. It sounds like what you're working on with the flams and the paradiddles and the slow grooves, like those are timing exercises, but they can also be movement exercises. And if you're trying to find like a more nuanced touch, like think about like how big can you make your motion, like how big and smooth can you make your motion without being louder?
Yeah.
Right? Like taking up all the space you have time to take up, but still landing kind of softly, the way you want to find this softer, more nuanced touch. I don't know.
Have you ever seen Daniel's? I don't know if you've ever talked to Daniel Glass about this whole thing where it's like he does this exercise where you snap, you take your arm and you just let your arm drop and snap all the way at the bottom of your hand dropping.
Yeah.
It's this snapping exercise, and like trying to snap at the very, very bottom of where you're dropping your hand. And he gets into this whole thing about just like same deal, like movement, right?
Yeah.
Like how are you moving and creating a deliberate stroke or a deliberate, you're deliberately playing these things instead of your body, you're trying to strike the drum and your body is just moving the way it needs to for you to strike the drum, versus I'm moving specifically to strike the drum a particular way.
Right.
I don't know if that is sort of what you're saying.
Totally. And you mentioned Gadsden, like an example of this that I think of all the time is, you've probably seen it, that like the video of the Bill Withers live thing that Gadsden played. Kiss of My Love. Holy shit. Like
how does he get that snare sound?
Because like he's playing the sticks like 3 inches off the snare and the hi-hat, but there's so much velocity. Like every one of those strokes is coming from the middle of his body. And even though it's a stroke just this big, it's like, 3 or 4 inches, there's so much behind it. There's so much velocity. So it's not loud, but it's just so like powerful and rooted.
I've watched that video 1,000 times and I'm like, I don't understand how he gets that snare drum sound out of what he's doing with his hand.
Yeah.
Hey y'all, I'm not hip. You tell me again. Bill Withers.
Okay.
So there's a song "Kiss of My Love." They do this live. I think it's live at Carnegie Hall, right?
Yeah, I think about it. Yeah.
So James Gadsden's on drums, and I don't know if you know the groove, but it has like this really fat snare part. It's like, I mean, it is like cracking,
like fast shuffle 16th hi-hat. Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Awesome.
And if he's not playing the snare drum, the stick is literally laying on the rim of the snare. Yeah. And he just like, he does this like snap.
You know what? I think I've seen it. I think I know what you're talking about, because but I'm gonna look it up to make sure it's what I'm thinking.
Just check it out. It's awesome. Like the way that snare sounds and how it cracks, and it's not loud. It's just like this solid crack, and like it looks like he doesn't even lift the stick.
Right. So to me, that snare sound is all about like how he moves, because how he's moving is kind of weird, Yeah. And you might not be able to recreate that motion perfectly, but if you put yourself in that mentality, like I'm going to think of this stroke coming from, inside my lungs and out the tip of my fingers, and it's only going to come up about 3 or 4 inches off the head. But if I think of it coming from there and just like the very tip of a whip, just like everything you've got into this one short, fast stroke, then your body will like come up with its own version of that thing. And so, yeah, like instead of coming at it from the perspective of like the choices in terms of the instruments or the groove or whatever, if you come at it from the perspective of the motion, like what is his motion and how is it resulting in that sound? That's helped me a ton, especially in the studio here. Like I talked about sort of lightening up my touch and finding that nuance again. I'll channel Gadsden, or I'll channel, I don't know, Glenn Kochi or somebody, just putting myself in that headspace.
Yeah, there's speaking of Near Z, man, there's an ad he did for Sonar recently, another video, and you watch him move around the kit, and it's really amazing, like his control of dynamics. Even he's moving, making big strokes, but that doesn't mean he wants a big sound. He's just working on creating a rhythm and a dynamic that when you watch it, you can almost watch him with the sound off and hear what he's doing.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. It's interesting you make that point, because like when you start thinking about like your overall motion, there's so much more about your sound that your motion affects than just the dynamic, right? Because like we deal in soft and loud all the time, but there's just all kinds of colors in there about like sharp versus soft or fat versus thin or what like that you can, like I said, if you put yourself in a certain headspace in terms of your motion, then those different colors and sounds, the little shades between soft and loud will start to come out.
Yep.
So here's an idea, and this is something that I've been really wanting to do as I'm starting to play again and just kind of reevaluating how I'm playing, and I'm coming through on the other end of like a repetitive stress injury that I'm working through, and so it's giving me a chance to like reevaluate my playing and how I want to move forward as things are opening back up. And so I used to record a lot, and I had a little digital recorder, plug it into my mixer, but because of this repetitive stress injury that I'm working out, I realized that it has a lot to do with motion. It has a lot to do with maybe some old bad habits that have attributed to it. And as I'm coming through it and learning more how to prevent it in the future, I realize it's going to take more than just recording myself audibly. I have to use a visual element to there as well. So not only can I hear myself, but I need to really buckle down and find something to record myself on the side. Not necessarily if I find something for social media that I can use, that's great. But it's going to be for educational purposes, and so maybe there's going to be that would be beneficial for all, for everybody.
Yeah,
to do as well.
I think so. I use that little Zoom. What's it called? The SN4 or something like that.
I thought it was the HQ2N or some shit.
Some sexy names right there.
You're probably the little one that it's called the Q2N.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I use that thing because it's this big, and the sound quality is good. You don't have to hook up a mic to it or anything. You can just
really
dial
That's
down.
What I need to do.
Yeah.
And it hooks. They have a little stand that you can hook it onto or it has like a little holder so you can hook it onto a mic stand. And
nice.
Yeah.
Steve got
That's a piece of gear that we forget. It's like I don't need another crash cymbal. I need a camera.
Yeah. And they're cheap. I think the 4K one is like 200, but I think the regular one is, I don't know, I think it's like $100.
Yeah, maybe 150,
Dude.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Shit.
But
I'm buying one today.
Are they? It's pretty interesting that they're not the same company as Zoom, are they?
I don't think so. Who knows?
I don't know.
I don't know. One person's going to own it all one day, so who gives a fuck?
Let's ask Jeff Bezos.
He's like, no, I own that.
That's mine.
I own that.
That's mine.
Yeah.
That's mine. That's mine. Are you guys interested in bringing up like any notable guests you guys have recently had, over this in recent months or anything like that?
Sure.
I think about like Josh Harmon for you, Zach.
Yeah, he was a surprise, man.
Super for me too.
Yeah. Nick, do you know this guy, Josh Harmon?
I don't.
He is, I don't know, 24 or something, and talk about catching lightning in a bottle on social media. Like, he started doing these drums and comedy videos where he would,
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. So he's just completely blown up on Instagram and mainly TikTok, which is just a whole other TikTok. Anyway, but I didn't know what to expect going into that interview, but he was so introspective and so philosophical. Like, on the surface, what he does is just total goofballery, right? I mean, first and foremost, he's a badass drummer. Like, all of the things he's able to do to sort of like transcribe and emulate and play along with all of these videos, he's a badass drummer first and foremost. But like, he also has a background in like improv comedy and doing sketch stuff, and so I don't know, I expected just a little bit of a goofball interview, and I was ready for it, but he was like super intellectual about it all, and really philosophical, and a lot of just kind of much more profound than I expected in terms of sort of life lessons and what the things that he's done have really taught him about drumming and about himself and living life and etc.
Nice. Yeah, I've actually, when you said his name, it didn't ring a bell, but I was like, oh, I watch his videos all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what we're finding is, and Nick, I'm sure you do this too, where you're like, oh, this is going to be a cool interview. This guy's a great drummer and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden it takes you someplace else. And you're like, oh my God, if I wasn't a drummer, I would still listen to that.
Yep.
And I feel like a better person after this, and I feel like I'm growing, and it's fun to have this platform, and I feel like we're creating something, we're providing something, but also I feel like I'm the consummate student, and it's like, man, this was a blast, and
yeah.
I mean, I mentioned that about Mark Stepro, and
yeah, that was
the funny
a great
backstory.
Great one you did with Mark Stepro.
The backstory with that, and Nick, I even texted you because I listened to your interview with him as well, and is that like I'm the one that worked at the drum store in Ohio and signed Mark up when he was 12 years old for his drum lessons.
It's awesome.
And it's so crazy at this point in my life, at this age and this point in my life, to be like, okay, shit, here's this kid, and now he's in LA just destroying, and I'm like, what is going on here? But also to be like another one of those people that you're like, man, I wish you lived closer. Let's hang out.
He's a great dude.
Well, and
He's
Matt,
such a great dude.
like something you said in that interview that really resonated with me was it was something about how, like, in your younger years you would have been maybe more defensive or more envious about this guy that came up behind you. Who's now just like slaying it in LA, but like where you are in your life now, you're much more able to just like be happy for that dude and admire that dude and learn from that dude. And I feel myself sort of settling into that healthier mindset as well. I think the pandemic maybe sapped a little bit of my ambition in a good way, or maybe it sapped a little bit of my insecurity. Like, it just brought more clarity to the kind of musician I want to be, the kind of musicians I want to play with, I feel less susceptible to getting caught up in the hustle, race, status, image sort of thing.
I feel like
COVID did that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It just had them reevaluate whatever it be, like you said, playing, who you want to play with, what kind of musician you want to be. But for bigger things like, where do I want to live? Do I not want to be with this person anymore? Do I want to switch careers?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Matt, you and I got to talk after this.
We're done.
Dude, well,
I guess we should tell you now. Zach is coming over to Drummers Resource. It's gonna be...
Yeah, fuck you guys, man.
It's like Skip Bayless.
I never wanted to do this anyways.
Yeah, I never wanted to do it anyway.
I was pressured into it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, man, I feel like the podcast has done it for me. I mean, like early on, I was having people that were kind of my peers that we were all kind of fighting for some of the same gigs, and I felt intimidated by them, but I didn't really know them, and I created this fake narrative in my head because of my insecurities. And then I'm like, hey man, you want to come over to my house and I'm starting this podcast? And they're like, yeah. And then I'd sit down for an hour and a half or so and talk to them and be like, what the hell am I thinking? You're a good dude, you're a great player, you struggle with the same things I do, or you have your own story, and what am I doing? Like, why am I creating this in my head? And I'm just making myself miserable. And also over time, there's so much talent out there, and people are making it happen, and it's like, it can be daunting at times, but man, there's opportunities. You can either buy your own design or by finding it and doing other things to get that work or do what you want to do. And it's like, somebody said, as long as Vinnie Colaiuta's walking the earth, I'm sorry, but there's nothing you can do to make put yourself on top. But it's so much more about that. And really, man, I've found so much peace in like raising other people up, and it's and also grow as a musician and enjoy music again, and enjoy drumming more so again.
And the idea, like, being on top is bullshit. Like, there is no on top. It's like,
exactly.
have you found your place in the world? Right? Have you found your role in life and in your musical community that fulfills you, and in which you're able to fulfill others and, you know, make yourself invaluable to people you care about? Like, on top is bullshit. It's just like,
and what's going to happen when you quote unquote get to the top doing something that you didn't really want to do anyway?
Right.
You're just doing it because everyone else is doing that, and then you get there and you're like, oh, this actually isn't really what I want to do.
Yep.
So that was another thing that Mark Stepro, he kind of like alluded to was, you know, because I was saying, oh, my phone is almost out of battery. He's like, oh, did we win? Did we win the internet? Did we win? You know, it's like this whole, like, you could apply that to anything. Did we win at podcasting? Uh-oh. Hold on. Oops, did I lose you guys?
As his phone dies.
Yeah, I know. Now I got a weird call that came in. That was messed up. Oh. No. So it's like this whole
Steely
idea.
Dan.
Just missed it.
Leave me alone, Donald. I'm doing a podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna want to bump one. I'm gonna bump all your songs up by 1 BPM anyway. So you're not gonna want me. But, you know, this whole idea is like, oh, did we win at podcasting? Did we win at the internet? Did we win? Like, it's this constant competition. And even my wife, because I'm starting after my interview with Dave Elitch and then took a lesson from him.
I did too.
Trying to work on my posture.
Yeah.
And like, I'm trying to do meditation every day. And my wife sat me down and said, look, I realize that for you, a lot of what you do in your life is performative. And it's kind of, you compete with yourself a lot, you know, but when you meditate, it's not a competition. It's not performative. You need to just let it be and just concentrate. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And it is about a mindset, you know, and it's not about, and there's so much that in the world that makes us look at drumming and music as a competition. And we need to start letting that go, and, you know, and enjoy it for what it is, because I think we're sabotaging ourselves when we think of it too much as a competition.
Yeah.
I think touching on some of the stuff that you had talked about the competition, but then also sort of the did we win, and we all have these goalposts of like things we're trying to achieve, or quote unquote we're trying to like get there. And a lot of the stuff that I've been doing, especially in the last like 6 to 9 months, is really trying to be a lot more present, which sounds sort of like cheesy and esoteric, but like I went to a therapist and I was like, I'm really freaking out about getting old. Right. And I was like, I feel like my life, like, I feel like years are just like flying by. And he was like, and I mean, this was after a few conversations with him, but he was like, yeah, because you live he was like, you live in the future and you don't live in the current time. And, you know, like, it's sort of like when you're you're chewing food and you're already thinking about your next bite kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've been really trying to do is, even like, I have a reminder on my phone every hour that just says be present. And for 15 seconds, I'll just sit there and like kind of look around and, like look out the window or whatever. And it sounds very small, but when I see that notification, then I decide whether I want to take those 15 minutes or 15 seconds and be present, or if I don't, then you're like, oh, everything in life becomes a choice, and you're choosing to do these different things. And it's helped, man. It's really helped me sort of slow down and just, and be here. Like, the only thing that exists is the present.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like we're having this conversation, and like, I could be sitting here on my phone, and then it's like, well, then I'm not here. I'm somewhere else. I'm just not, and I'm trying to just live I'm sure plan for the future and all those things, but like, you can't live in the future. You can't be like, well, I'll be happy when I get this gig, or when my studio is finished being set up, or when I achieve this thing, or when I this or that. And it's like,
yeah.
I think that the crazy thing, I had this kind of fucked up, but I had this dream that I died, right? But I mean, whatever. I guess I died in the dream. But I woke up the next day and I was like, so all these things that like I want to accomplish, or I'm trying to compete with other people with, and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, none of that mattered because now I'm dead, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but then it's like, so I was willing to just be unhappy every single day, until I achieve this thing. And then like, so if you never achieve that thing, it's like you're making an agreement with yourself to be unhappy sort of every day, and live in like this world of like, I'll be happy when, or I'll be fulfilled when. I know this is deep, but like, I think that
no, man, it's about lifestyle. It's not an end goal, because again, this kind of circles back to the thing that I was saying before. Like, man, when I get enough recording equipment, and like, can you imagine if we could record all this stuff when we were kids, and now we have it, and I have this realization, it's like, okay, I've met this goal. What does it mean for me? It doesn't mean more happiness. No, it does mean like, now how do I evaluate that? But it didn't meet that expectation that I had created in my head, that once I own this thing, once I accomplish this thing, I'll feel this way. And that's not what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was surprised at, like, when all the gigs went away, I was kind of surprised at how little I missed it. And I know that not every musician shares this experience. I think most musicians were just like fucking devastated, and rightfully so. But just talking about being in the present, like, it put me in this mindset of like, okay, what I love doing is gone. But what else can I do? And I found, presence and purpose and joy in, a lot of, well, not a lot of different things, just my life got smaller, right? We were just staying home, and I'm super fortunate to live with someone that I fucking love, and we have a dog that we love, and we have a house that we love. And it just forced me to be more present and realize how little I actually need to be happy. And so now that, we're kind of reemerging, I think I'm looking with a clearer eye about things that I could do. Like, is that, is that really what I want? Is this thing that I could do really what I want? Or should I just sort of let that go by and, not fuck with it?
Did that mess with you at all, where did you feel, because I've had similar feelings like this before, where did you feel guilty that you didn't miss it?
A little bit.
Like,
I think I had some survivor's guilt because, I like, I'll just be honest about it. I mean, we're very fortunate to be like okay financially. Like, we did not have to scramble. I got some unemployment insurance. My wife's job actually got busier. She was working from home before the pandemic, so her job was never in danger. So I always kind of add the caveat that, like, especially among musicians, I think I'm in a very privileged position that I wasn't wiped out and we didn't have to stress too hard.
And you stayed healthy.
Yeah, totally. Fuck.
Yeah.
I continued to teach via Zoom. So that was still some income. My church gig continued for a long time. They were just recording remotely or, live streaming a service with an empty sanctuary. So, I had a couple of income streams that continued, and I had a great house and a great wife and, a great life to just sort of like hibernate in for a year. But yeah, I did feel some guilt about that. And it was weird because we define ourselves by what we do for better or for worse. And it was just kind of a realization that I'm not out there gigging, but I'm not miserable. And I think the fact that I wasn't miserable came from my previous insecurity because when everybody's out there, you're on Instagram and it's like, oh, holy shit, he's doing that too. Or, oh, holy shit, he's in this studio, blah, blah, blah. But then when nobody's doing anything, it's like, cool.
It kind of made me feel better about not gigging too.
Absolutely.
But no, Zach, this is great. So then, as things are happening, now you can see through that lens.
Yep.
When you see stuff on Instagram and all that stuff. You're like, yeah, good, cool. Well, I'm good. I'm doing my thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's cool too, dude. I totally get that.
Yeah.
I think that I love that. I talked to Chris Layton from Double Trouble, and he was like, "I'm a drummer. It's what I do, but it's not who I am."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's
yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a person. I do that. I know, Zach, we've talked about it before. Zach loves to cook, and he has all the. It's like, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
There's other aspects of your life, and it's like, this is what I do. I don't think anyone's out there like, oh, that marketing person got this other director of marketing job at this other company, and I don't think they're comparing themselves that way, like we do as drummers or
no.
musicians.
It's really
in
interesting. But at the same time, and I remember you saying that. I think it was even in Mark Stepper's, but one of your interviews, you brought that up about him, and I always find it interesting. When I'm flying and I'm sitting next to somebody, and say you strike up a conversation in the past, I would always try and wait as long as I could to if somebody said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And I would always try and push back as long as I can, because as soon as you tell them what you do, all they want to do is talk about it because it's such a mystery to them. And I'm like, there's more to me than this. Now, there was a time in my life, I'll admit that, fucking A, man, I play the drums, I do this.
Right.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, no, I have other things that, no, I do. But again, that is what we're talking about right now is something that we wrestle with internally and personally. That it's because again,